Everybody, it's Jim from Sprague Woodturning. This week we're going to take this section of walnut log that's seen better days and combine it with some designer epoxy to make an awesome vase. I've been wanting to get at this project for a while, and this is a piece of walnut that's, well, the guy that I got it from told me it sat around for probably 15 years, I think he said. And it's been in my kiln now for probably 3 months, so it's good and dry, ready for casting. So what I'm going to do, obviously, I mean, this big crack has got to be filled before we do anything because I'm really worried about this flying apart on the lathe. I do want to use this as my center, so we're going to end up losing all of this. But the problem is if I cut this now, it may fall apart. So, you know, I'm just going to clean the bottom, the surfaces, the end grain here, and seal them up with some tuck tape, and then we'll do a pour in here, and that'll be the first step of this. And then once this resin sets, then we'll be able to cut the blank and use this pith as the center part of this project. And I know that a lot of people are probably saying, well, why don't I just put it off center? Then, you know, the pith really affects your foot. So if your pith is here, then, you know, your foot's going to have to be quite large on this. And that's fine if that's what you're going for. But at this stage, I don't really know what I want to do. But I do know that I want the pith in the center of my work at the top and on the very bottom. So that's why I'm doing it this way. So first thing we gotta do is get this cleaned up. This did have bark on it. I saved you the hassle of watching that. So I just got to get a little bit more off of here, clean this groove out, and then we'll be able to mix up some resin and do some casting. So another thing about this section of log, typically, and I've worked with pieces like this in the past, when you see something that looks like this, in all likelihood, the tree has probably been hit with lightning. And a lot of times that will kill the tree. Sometimes it survives and it doesn't cook it too bad. But this is probably about the third one that I've had now that I'm 100% positive that it actually got hit by lightning. That's why it's opened up and then the bark started to grow around the inside. So I'm just using the Kutzall grinder here, and the reason for that is it still has saw marks in it, basically chainsaw, and I was worried that the tape wasn't going to adhere to it properly, and then we would end up with a leak. I decided to use the duct tape this week. I don't know, maybe I should have used tuck tape, but I've used the duct tape in the past without any issues, so that's why I went with it in this week's project. So here I'm just doing both sides, making sure that I get all of the cracks, and because if you don't get the cracks, then you're certainly going to have a leak. This week we're going to be using deep casting epoxy from Designer Epoxy. I like to use this when you're looking for a long set time, and that will certainly help fill in any of those cracks that you see in the log. I think that we're going to add these pieces. I've got a couple of them, and I'm going to throw them down inside of that big open crack that you see there. And that combined with the crystal purple should actually look pretty smart. Yeah, let's give it a try. And all this was I believe this is Blue Laguna, and I had a bunch left over, so I poured it on plastic and let it set up. And as you can see, it's kind of really lumpy, and that's because it was starting to harden up on me. So let's try and reuse them. All right, so this is 24 ounces, and I am sure it's not going to be enough, but we'll start here. Very hard to judge these things. And of course, I'm using the deep cast because I really want this to migrate down and fill in all those cracks. Oh, geez, I'm surprised there, huh? Thought for sure it wouldn't be enough. Here's our pieces. I'm really surprised. I thought this would take a lot more than this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave this here for now. I'm going to watch it. I'm sure this is going to drop down as, I mean, the reason for using the deep cast here is so that it'll flow into all those cracks that you've seen, or anyway, hopefully it does. So that's going to drop the level a little bit. Then I'll move it into my clean room, and we'll see you guys in 3 days. Well, I walked into the shop today to check on this, and this is what greeted me. And I know that this looks different from the last time you seen it, and I'll explain that. Basically, the tape that I had on here originally leaked. As soon as I shut the camera off, I noticed there was a big leak just poured out. And if you've done any of this work, here, let me turn the light on here. If you've done any of this work, you know that once that resin leaks, there's nothing going to stick to it and stop it. So I dumped out the resin and incorporated it in other projects such as this, little globes, and my resin cups that I use. So there's a bunch of it there. So it wasn't a total disaster. Cleaned it off, waited a day, took the tape off, let the resin harden up. Then that was on this side. This is the side that was leaking. So I said, fine, all right. I get out my glue gun and use my 6mm poly. And this side didn't leak, no problems at all. This side, I left the tape on there on this side because at the time it wasn't leaking it. I thought I had it licked. But what I did, just to be safe, was I took more of the 6mm poly and the glue, taped it all off with the glue, added tape, and I said, okay, like, this has got to be good. Nope. It leaked again. It's all run down the wall. Obviously, my workbench is tilted back a little bit in here. So I'm not sure what to do. I got to get this out of here, get it cleaned up, and then I'll try and figure out exactly what I'm going to do here. All right, so this is the side that originally leaked, and then I pulled the tape off and put this on. I let it sit overnight for the resin to cure up a little more before I did this, and as you can see, it didn't leak at all. So we're gonna have to do something on this side, and I guess we're gonna have to strip this off, clean it off, and I'm gonna let it sit overnight, and then we'll do the 6mm poly again. I probably should have pulled the tape off and said, you know what, let's do this method. But it, like I said, it didn't leak, so I thought it was all right. Well, guess not. One of the objects of my channel here is to, well, for people to learn from my mistakes, as bad as they are. And in this case, I could have hid this and said that everything went well, but nobody learns that way. So, I think it's important to leave this kind of content in my channel, and that way you can learn from my mistakes. I think right here is where that leaked. I can see it running down the outside right here. All right, let's clean it up with some acetone, and then I think we'll just put it in the clean room to dry. Oh man. Acetone is a very toxic chemical, so make sure you dispose of your rags properly and make sure you use it in a well-ventilated area, and gloves are a must. Here you'll see I've switched to the Arc Cast from Designer Epoxy, and the reason why I did that is because, first of all, if I didn't, this project would have been late, and the blank essentially has had 2 pours of deep cast in it, so that did migrate down into those cracks and filled it up. And along with the purple, I decided to use some sky blue just to give us kind of a more multicolored resin pour. So that's kind of why I went in that direction, if you're curious. There, I'm just going to let these set up in my clean room where there's heat for a little bit. Once it hits about 42 degrees, then we'll do the pour. Let's get the plastic on the end of this log so that we can make this happen. So this is the method that I should have used. Now, if you have to glue a large area like this, make sure you do it in sections like I'm doing here. That way the glue doesn't harden up on you and you get proper adhesion to the plastic. If you try to do it all in one shot, first of all, the glue gun can't keep up with it, and second of all, the plastic probably isn't going to stick to the form the way that it should. All right, so there. I really hope this is going to work. This is getting pretty painful, actually. So I put that first piece of duct tape on there, and I wasn't so sure that it was going to work. So this here will make sure that the plastic stays tight against the form so that it doesn't bulge out. This other side, I mean, it still looks good. I don't think there's any need for us to do anything here. There was no leaks below that yesterday. This resin has set in here, so really, I think that it's good. The other thing too is I totally forgot. I've got one of these forms that I could have set this in so that I didn't have this massive mess in my clean room. So yeah, that'll be better. And I'm going to do the pour out here. That art cast is going to warm up quite quickly, and I think it will set in here quite quickly. So yeah, fingers crossed that there's not going to be any issues, because it's getting to me, people. It's getting to me. Okay, we're at 51 degrees, so probably way past when I should have poured. Wish me luck. After I put the epoxy in, I noticed that the plastic was bulging at the top. So I just took a couple of Dixie cups and some tape and pushed them up against the form, and that solved that problem. Okay, fingers crossed. I don't see any leaks. I've said that before though, haven't I? All right. If all's good, we'll see you tomorrow and we'll be able to put this on the lathe. Well, all right, happy days. Finally, we have a solid piece to work with. This color in here looks pretty cool, along with our added pieces. So, plan here is to get all this tape off. I'm going to grind off the ends here until I can find where the pith is, mount it between centers, flatten one side, that way I can put it down on my bandsaw, and then we'll round this thing according to where the pith is. Hopefully, that's what we're going to do. So at this stage of the game, I'm happy that I've got a solid blank to work with, but you know, the way that this project has gone, it's in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what's next? What isn't going to work next? So here I'm just grinding using a Kutzall sander to find that pith, and then we'll get it mounted on the lathe. As you can see, I'm only doing about 100 RPM here, so I'm going quite slow because it is really out of balance. But again, this lathe with all of the attachments on it weighs about 1,000 pounds, so it can take a lot of this out of balance, if you will. In an effort to speed things up, that's why I'm moving to the bandsaw, because it would take forever to actually whittle this thing down to get it round to where you want it. So that's why I wanted to basically cut away the waste on the bandsaw, just for speed and efficiency. For the record, I am standing to the side of this. That way, if it does happen to come off the lathe, you're not going to be picking walnut out of your teeth if you've got any left. So whenever I'm turning sketchy stuff like that, I never stand directly in front of the work. There are some people that are probably going to wonder why I didn't put a faceplate on the bottom of this. And I've explained this numerous times because it's awful hard to get things lined up when you put a faceplate on it, because when you put a faceplate on it, you're committed. I do have the fortune of having a bandsaw that will cut 12 inches under the bearings. All right, so this is what I'm thinking, but of course this is all subject to change. I'm mostly going to stick with the gouge today too. We'll have to see how it goes with this. I'm not so sure, but we'll find out. For the majority of this project, I did use the 5/8 bowl gouge from David Ellsworth. Some people are probably going to be wondering why I didn't use a spindle roughing gouge here. And, that the piece was essentially round, so I didn't really see the need for it. And I prefer to use a bowl gouge in this regard because you can work further off the tool rest like I am here. So here we're cutting in a tenon. You'll see me use the 3/16" parting tool from Crown just to make that shoulder nice and crisp. And that way we can get it mounted in the chuck and certainly make things a lot more secure. As you can see, I'm working on the foot area here. And, in the past, I've said that, a lot of times I put the piece of wood on the lathe and I let it, in a sense, speak to me. What do you want to be? And, so I drew up that little diagram saying, okay, yeah, I think that this piece would look nice with that, with the resin flowing all the way from the top to the bottom into it. And then, as it develops on the lathe, I change it up. It's just the way that I do things. I try not to be married to a certain plan and kind of wing it in a sense. And I know that I've talked about this in the past. And let the wood talk to you. Let it determine what you want to see. Now we do have some thermal cracking issues to deal with, and you know in a way, I've been waiting for this to come along because there is a technique that I want to try, and we'll see that here in a little bit. But I decided to put a little flared top on to this vase just to give it a little more pizzazz, if you will, some more definition. So that's why I decided to go that route. And there I'm just pointing out that we got some pretty amazing resin and some pretty terrible thermal cracking. Here in this video, you'll probably see me use pretty much all of the hunter tools that I own, the Hercules, the Osprey, and the Phoenix. Those are the three main tools that I got from Hunter Tools that I absolutely love to use. just showing off the thermal cracking areas that we're going to need to fix, and the technique that I want to use with this pure gold is a Japanese technique called, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Kintsugi. That is the method where they would repair pottery with gold powder and lacquer. And I believe that, I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I really wish that I had done this repair on the lemon, or not the lemon glitter, on the purple glitter vase that I did. That's the most popular video on my channel. So I'm just using some thin Starbond and just straight gold pigment. I'm not mixing it in with the CA glue at all. I want to fill the cavity with the pigment and then set it with the epoxy. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but I think that it turned out absolutely spot on, and I really find that it does actually look like gold. Anyway, I don't know how much penetration I got there. I'm thinking that maybe the pigment prevented the CA glue from penetrating, but we'll see. I may have to do this a few times. Yeah, I might just fill in some of this with thin CA glue on the top here. There's a sneak peek into what that resin pour is going to look like. It almost looks like a peacock hollow form, doesn't it? Lots of cracks in this piece. There, I'll let that sit up for about a half hour or so, and then we'll get it back on the lathe and see what we got. That was near the end of the day, so I just let it sit overnight. So this is the next day, and I'm just trimming away all the excess glue and the pigment that's on the surface. Hoping to see a good solid area where all that pigment is, and you know what? It looks like it worked absolutely fantastic. So that gets a thumbs up. I was a little concerned that the CA glue wasn't going to penetrate past the pigment, but it actually did. I did have to do a second filling, but for the most part, the first filling did exactly what I wanted it to do. There were other areas, as you turn away more and more of this, you're going to expose maybe some more cracks. So that's what I had to fill there. And, there you go. There's a prime example, exactly what I wanted to go for. And happy days, especially after the way this has gone. Just doing a little bit of shear scraping with the gouge before we move on to drilling this piece out and hollowing. And again, this is my preferred method to give you a perfect surface before sanding. Let's take a detour from this and see what I got on the weekend. So I went on a little adventure to get some walnut yesterday and some burls from Troy. I'll show you those in a second. So these are, they're kind of small for bowls, but I was out of walnut for cutting boards. So all three of these logs here will probably end up being cutting boards, my oval cutting boards. Got some really gnarly pieces from Troy too. There's some maple in here. This here I believe is walnut again, but as you can see, there's got some issues. There's a nice cherry burl that will probably make a nice burl vase, and look at the eyelets on that. Very cool. This was neat. 100% looks like a dog or a polar bear, and what this is a knot grow over. So there's the branch that came through. This is well, I'll let you imagine what you think that is. And there's a spruce burl. I typically don't do a whole lot with softwood burls, but that one's kind of all the way around it, so maybe that'll be a nice hollow form. I don't know, usually the grains kind of bland in them. That's some cherry, more cherry burl. I believe that's a walnut burl down in there. Another cherry. This piece here, this.
Hey, watch it.
This is came from a tree from, Troy told me, the Niagara River. And this is a walnut tree that was 6 feet in diameter. And this is just a limb, but there's a really large burl on the side of it. So really can't wait to tear into this. What else do we got? This is a big old gnarly piece of maple here, still soaking wet. I actually just picked off a big mushroom. I believe that's some more walnut. Again, another neat feature inside of that. So, you know, there's all kinds of future projects here. These knot grovers are kind of neat. What else is here? Ugh, it's stuck in there. There's the other side of that spruce burl. So, I don't know. We'll have to see. I also got some from another guy in the shop. This is catalpa. This is a piece of catalpa, and this would be a catalpa burl, something I've never had. And then that piece right there, hopefully the sun's not too bad, should make all kinds of interesting pieces after it dries out. So there's a good chance that we'll see most of this stuff on the channel. And yeah, look at the size of that limb. And I realize that the shade here, you may not be able to see it all that well, but you know, that's easily 16 inches in diameter, and that was just a limb off of that tree. Anyway, let's get back to the lathe. I got some work ahead of me here. So as I'm drilling this out, I'll tell you a little bit more about that walnut tree. Troy told me that, like I said, it was on the Niagara River, and it was on a property that basically the War of 1812 took place. So it's a historic tree, and I feel very fortunate that, you know, I've got a piece of this historic tree. Pretty much the only time that Canada and the US has fought. So glad to see that that's well behind us. But there's a lot of interesting pieces there, and just keep it clean in the comments. All right, it's all in good fun. We are all set up and ready to hollow this beast out. This is the one-way captive system. It comes with interchangeable arms. As you can see, there's a laser right here if you haven't been here before. And I've got the laser pointed right on the very tip of the cutter. There are different cutters. This is a teardrop cutter. I like to use this cutter initially. So I'll go in, clean out the very bottom, and then start working my way up the sides, and you know, just opening this piece up so that I think that we're going to be able to use this the whole way. I don't think we're going to have to switch the arm out to a bent arm. And of course, this is a steady rest. People have asked me where have I got this from. This was actually made by my son in high school. So he needed kind of a project. So I said, well, I need a steady rest, and he made that. And he did a fantastic job on it. All right, well, let's get this done. And can't wait. I mean, I think this is going to be a very pretty piece. Before I go down and actually clean out the bottom of this, I figured that I would open the vase up a little more. You are supposed to work basically from the top of a form down. That way, you know, if you go down and try and clean out the very bottom of a form like this,
then, essentially you make it weaker. So if you still have a lot of mass to remove on the upper part of it, then, you could have some issues. So, you're supposed to work from basically the top down. You can go down to the very base and open the form up by just extracting the tool, and of course that will give you more room inside. There's not a ton of footage here because I know that it's very hard for people to see what's going on. This is actually the first vase that I've done on the channel where we can actually see fairly decently inside of it. So about the stuff on the trailer, just if you've got any ideas for any of the things that you've seen there, just let me know what you think can be made with these. Uh, the one in particular is going to be a challenge, but anyway, I'll be glad to hear your comments on that thing.
I thought I would give you a little sneak peek inside. As you can see, there's more thermal cracking in there. And I'm getting some pretty decent vibration too. This is a long way off the tool rest. If I had to guess, it's at least 10 inches. So getting a little bit up and down movement with the edge of the tool. But it's working. Just got to take really, really light cuts and hopefully nothing really bad happens. Plan on doing a resin finish on the inside of this as well. Check it out. This is new from Designer Epoxy. I'd like to think that I had a hand in this as I was trying to push them to make a UV resin because I think that it'd be really beneficial to most resin casters. This cures in 1 to 2 minutes and all you have to do is hit it with a black light and you can move forward with your project. So that is awesome. This is really going to help speed things up where you had to wait overnight to, fill in some voids. So that's great. Glad that they've come forward with this. I mean, like all great companies, they're always developing new products and improving on the products that they already have. And the other thing is the 1 to 2 hour fast cure epoxy. And look how crystal clear that is. This is another thing. We'll see both of these on the channel here. And this should really speed things up too. Thanks a lot, Designer Epoxy. Really appreciate it.
In this clip, when you watch it, when the cutter goes all the way down to the bottom, you can see kind of the the tool vibrating. Then that's where I was getting at. So the further you go off of that tool rest, even though I've got the tool rest kind of tilted in towards the vase, I don't know if you noticed that or not, the very top of it, when that goes down at the very base, then any little vibration there is really magnified. So in the end, we get it, and that's the main thing. But it certainly was a bit of a challenge at times to get a nice, clean cut surface. That was for sure. So there's a couple of clips here that shows the laser on the side of the form. And of course, I think right now I've got the wall thickness set at about a 1/2 inch or so. So essentially when that laser gets elongated on the side of the form or drops off of the form where you can't see it anymore, then you know that you've achieved the wall thickness that you want. So it's a really great tool. I really like using this, especially since I'm left-handed. As far as I know, D-Way Tools is the only tool manufacturer on the market that makes a left-handed hollowing tool. So, this is ideal for people such as me that are left-handed.
So here we are, finally. Boy, it's been quite a chore. Got a fair bit of tear out down the bottom third of this, but the uh, the vibrations are just so bad that I'm really worried that something really bad is going to happen. You can see some thermal cracking down there. So I'm going to sand this up, probably go to about 180, and then we'll do a resin coat finish on it. On the inside, just got a little bit of work to do on the outside flange here, and then we'll be ready for sanding.
Starting to sand here with 60 grit from sandpaper.ca, and these are the 3.5-inch dimple discs, and you can see I've got a little extension here, and as long as you just loosely hold that in your hand, there's really not much need for a glove. And it's a little bit of hand sanding here and there just because I couldn't get on the inside of that rim a little bit. And please note that I'm also wearing a self-powered respirator, which you all should be wearing when you're sanding. You should be wearing a respirator of some sort. And because of the larger opening, it certainly was a lot easier to sand than a lot of the hollow forms that you see me and Vases do here on the channel.
All right, so everything's been sanded to 180 inside. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. And but there's some pretty decent cracks down in there that I want to get filled in, and I think the best way to do that is to use some art cast. So that's what I've got mixed up here, and I'm just going to pour it in and swish it around, and then I'll put it upside down in this container, and then hopefully that will seal up the majority of these cracks and make this thing stable. I'm going to try and drip some of it down inside first. I know you're not going to be able to see, but sorry. See even some out here on the rim. And yeah, when I flip these upside down, I realize that this is probably all going to come out, but that's all right. I'm all right with that. As long as we can get some resin penetration inside, then I'm good. So this is 6 ounces, and it should be more than enough. There, I think that's good enough. I'll just flip this upside down. Realize you probably can't see that all that well. I'll leave this for 10 minutes like this, and then I'll move it in my clean room. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
All right, so finally moving on to the outside of this piece. I didn't really see any need for trimming. And again, I started with the 60 grit. One of the benefits of doing the resin on the very open flange, like you see right there, is that it helps seal up that end grain. In most cases, the end grain will absorb more finish than side grain will. So by sealing up that end grain, you hopefully can move your project along faster instead of doing 3 coats, maybe down to 2. And so that's kind of my thought process on that. You can certainly leave a comment down below. I decided to cut in the foot area before I got too heavily into sanding here. And there I'm using the air-powered sander. And actually, I was able to fit that right inside of the form, and I probably could have sanded the entire form with that air-powered sander inside of it. But next time I'm working on a very large one like this, maybe that's exactly what I will do. That is the Triple E buffing compound from the Be All buffing system. So everything's been sanded from 60 to 800, and then the Triple E buffing compound, and then you'll see me use some denatured alcohol to clean the surface prior to the first coat of finish going on this absolutely gorgeous piece of wood.
So I happened to notice that the battery died in my mic, so I guess I better cover this again, even though I already did it once. Uh, wow, I'm really liking this gold technique for sure. It really, to me, looks like gold. I don't think you could argue that. And the resin, multicolored resin, absolutely beautiful. I decided to put a coat of finish on the inside, even though it probably didn't really need it. So I sanded some bubbles down and did that. This detail up here, really cool. I mean, you can't go wrong with walnut. And that is just beautiful. And what I'm going to do is, this is a little too thick. I'll cut it down to probably the same thickness as the rim so that they match. And that's it. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. It is spectacular. I love it. See you tomorrow for the second coat.
This is the next day, and for the new people, this is Triple E, again, the Triple E buffing compound. So I use this between coats on the Waterlux. Sometimes different finishes behave differently. I find that the general finishes stuff doesn't respond well to buffing like the Waterlux does for whatever reason. I did notice that there was a little run down there from some resin, and I don't even really understand how it got there, but it did. So I decided to do yet another coat on the inside. It's still visible a little bit, but really not that much. So that's why I decided to sand that again. And on top of that, using the denatured alcohol before the next coat of finish goes on.
Good morning. This is the second coat of Waterlux Original Gloss.
I decided to run this in real time so the people have an idea as to how fast that the lathe is spinning and how fast I move across the surface. I realize this is a vase, but it's the same principle for the bowls. So I was asked to leave this in here, so I'm going to do that. And then that way you've got a good idea as to maybe how often I'm applying the finish and the speed of the lathe, and of course how fast I'm moving across the surface. Take note that after I loaded the rag, I didn't go back to the spot that I left. And if you want to get a sag, that's exactly how you get it. So go back onto an area where there's bare wood and then work your way back to where you left off and then blend it all in. I find this is the best way for me to actually put these finishes on without getting runs and sags. And as you can see, I'm putting it on pretty heavy. By far, the Waterlux is probably the best finish that I've ever used. And just so everybody knows, I'm not affiliated with them at all. I just really enjoy the products that they do make, and essentially up against other finishes, I find that, if one finish is going to take 3 coats, you can usually get away with only doing 2 with the Waterlux.
Well, here she is. Got a little run down inside of there that I'll probably take care of after, but I think this is pretty much done. 2 coats will do it. Beautiful piece. Absolutely love that resin too. Multicolored right there in the rim. Awesome. All right, we'll see you when we're doing the foot tomorrow.
Like I said earlier, I want to thin this foot out. It was just way too thick for my liking. And after I basically get this piece sanded up, I'm going to take some CA glue and completely saturate the foot area on the bottom side, and that'll do a couple of things that will, again, alleviate how much finish you're going to need on the end grain, because on the foot, it's 100% end grain. And then, so you won't have to use as much finish, and it will also stabilize any cracks that the resin wasn't able to get to. But first we got to clean the foot up. And so I'm just using the gouge, and then you'll see me switch over to the air powered sander. And the reason why I like to use the air powered sander, because it's right angled and you can get in real close to the live center that's in the tailstock. So there, you can see where I filled it with CA glue, but I did screw this up. One of them cracks went through, and it got down on the foot of the form. So, so you'll see here in a little bit that, I've actually got to do a little bit of sanding and do yet another coat on it. But I would have been able to get away with two, but it just the way that this project went, it kind of fought me every step of the way, and that's exactly how it goes sometimes. Sometimes, you can get into projects that, you know, are nice and smooth, and then sometimes you get into projects where you're just like, man, you start to wonder if it even wants to be finished, to be quite honest with you. I often thought through this process that maybe it's because you get hit by lightning. It just didn't want to cooperate. But in the end, it's an absolutely beautiful piece. But man, this thing was put up a fight. It really did. So now you might be wondering, how am I possibly going to put another coat of finish on this and not get my hands all over it? And that's with the use of my vacuum chuck. So as you can see, I just left the lathe off and ground down that nub, and then turned the lathe on slow, and then sanded it, I think, to about 400. I think there was any need to go any higher than that, and it worked just fine. And again, that vacuum chuck is just, it's a very valuable piece of kit that I own, and I'm so glad that I got one, and I highly encourage people to get one. They're not cheap, but trust me, it'll make your life a lot easier. Let's finish this up.
All right, here's this week's project. I mean, wow, it was a ton of work, but I the thing fought me all the way, but in the end, it was definitely worth it. The gold filled areas here is exactly what I was going for, and I'm really stoked about this. It's so shiny, I'm sorry. We will see this technique for sure in the future. I didn't show the bottom very well, but it's actually, I engraved it. And again, I'm trying to get that so you can see it. It's so shiny. But it's engraved, and with one coat of finish on that end grain, and that's the difference with using that CA glue and using the resin. I mean, after one coat of finish, look how well that's covered. So keep that in mind if you ever want to use that in the future. The resin area, beautiful color variation. Absolutely love that. And up here at the rim, it just looks like I don't know, a far off galaxy or something, a nebula, if you will. Inside, quite pleased with that as well. I don't think that I'm going to do anything else on the inside. And there you can see through the resin. So I will put some footage at the end and light this from the top to see the resin shining through. And overall, I'm really happy with this. This is probably, well, it's certainly in my top 10 for sure, maybe even the top 5. And I know that there's probably going to be some questions, would you put water in this? And the answer is no, don't ever put water in something like this. I haven't measured it, but it looks like maybe a 2-liter pop bottle might fit down inside of it. Cut that off, or if you can find another glass vase or plastic vase to go inside of this and then put water in this and then the flowers, then by all means do that. But I personally never would put any water in any wooden product, that's for sure, because eventually it doesn't matter how strong that finish is, you're probably going to have issues, so please stay away from that. And this piece is for sale. And if you are curious, and you want this piece, it certainly would make an awesome Christmas gift, please send me an email at spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and I will disclose the price. But yeah, it's a beauty, folks. It definitely is, and I'm really, really stoked about this. So don't forget to leave a comment down below for designer epoxy, all by itself, no periods, no hashtags, none of that business, to be entered into the 3-gallon kit giveaway at 80,000. And of course, that's only for Canada and the lower 48 states. And of course, by leaving a comment down below, you'll also be entered into my bowl draw. I should also mention that this is almost 9 3/4 tall and 8 inches around there at its widest dimension. I should mention that. And about a 1/2 inch wall thickness, thereabouts. Really, really happy about this. So please let me know in the comments what you think about this week's video. I truly love it. All right, well, that's it. We're on track to hit 75,000 subscribers next week. So next week will be the giveaway video. So please come on back for that. And of course, if you need anything, down in the description is all the links to the sponsors of my channel. So please check them out and put some money back in your pocket. Well, that's it. Till next week, take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell, and please share my videos with your friends. See you next week.